It is provocative to protest on Armistice Day, but it's not against the law to be provocative. That it will undoubtedly bring attention to the protest, the fact that it's happening at the same time as the Armistice Day services. Because I think there's a real benefit in society for the police to be operationally independent of government, because government is concerned ultimately about politics, and the police should be concerned ultimately about public safety. And obviously, there's a big common ground between those two elements because the government's also concerned by public safety. But generally speaking, the police should be left to do what they need to do, and only called in or publicly criticised in sort of extreme situations where where there's a proper reason for doing so. And I'm a bit worried that the police are being not given the space they need to deal with a really sensitive and difficult situation this weekend, and having to spend their time instead worrying about, going to see the Prime Minister.
What do you think of the Health Secretary's comments? I mean, is it provocative to protest on Armistice Day? Are protests by their very nature provocative? And are these protesters just exercising their legal rights?
I mean, it is provocative to protest on Armistice Day, but it's not against the law to be provocative. It will undoubtedly bring attention to the protest, the fact that it's happening at the same time as the Armistice Day services. On the other
But I
hand,
think the point is it's not happening at the same time as the Armistice Day services. They happen in the morning.
On the same day. But also there's a political point being made there, which is there's a lot of people calling for a ceasefire, and armistice, that's what an armistice is. So I don't think it's I think it can cut both ways. I think if you're going to disrupt the actual Armistice Day celebrations, or not celebrations, the commemorations, then which I don't think that is the plan at all. But if that did happen, that would backfire politically. But this is all should be in the political sphere. This is a political protest. Fundamentally, they're making political points, and they should be addressed politically. They're not criminal. It's not criminal act to disrupt. It's not criminal to be disrespectful, as much as some people might want it to be.
And do you worry that the describing the march as a hate march by the Home Secretary? I mean, is that likely to be inflammatory in what is already a pretty fractious situation?
I mean, I can't see how it helps anybody at all, because if these were hate marches, I think people would expect them to be banned, or for everybody to be arrested. But that's not what's been happening at all. There have been arrests and there have been criminal offences probably committed, but you're talking about tens of thousands of people, and I don't know whether there's been proportionately more or less or the same number of criminal offences that have been seen in these marches than any other marches in really controversial, difficult political circumstances. So calling it a hate march is I think ultimately a political point that the Home Secretary is making, and I think she has to be wary, because she is ultimately responsible for criminal for prevention of crime in the UK. She should be careful that when she makes political points like that, they're not interpreted ambiguously or specifically as points about the criminal intentions of the people who are on those protests.
Indeed. I mean, is that something that could wind her up in court? I mean, is it veering toward hate speech in itself?
No, I don't think it is. I don't think it's anywhere close to that. And she is, she has freedom of expression rights like everybody else, the Home Secretary, and also not least because she's a politician, so they're extra protected. But I think this is ultimately, I think there's an overall point in the question you asked, which I think is a fair question, but there is an overall point that all of these issues, they're not really criminal law issues at all. They're not legal issues. They're political issues. And I think the more we think of them as, the thing I disagree with must be a crime, or the thing that the person I disagree with must be a criminal, that the more we are not able to see the really important points, which is the politics. This is, really, really important political moment where this question about whether there should be a ceasefire or not, whether the government should be supporting what's going on or not, and all of that. All people should be condemning
Do
Hamas. Those are all political questions. They're not really. The criminal law has nothing to say about those questions.
And do you think that we're ending up having a discussion about things that are superficial when we need to be talking about things that are more relevant and important in this current situation?
So I don't think it's superficial
Hmm.
to worry about criminal offences, including support of terrorism, at these kind of protests, because those things have happened. It seems from the footage that I've seen, but we have to put them in their proper place in proportion. That ultimately, I mean, it seems to me that this is really fundamentally in the political sphere, not in the criminal law sphere, and that means that if the conversation is dominated by are there crimes being committed? Is this a
Then it's
hate
not
march?
helpful.
Those sorts of things.
Um,
That doesn't it obscures everything else, and I
yeah.
think that's to the detriment of the sort of public conversation.
Can I ask you one last question, just briefly? The Public Order Act has seen changes in the past year, stopping people locking onto objects and so on, and could see yet more. What do these changes mean, and how do they represent our right to protest? Is it being curtailed, or are these fine tuning, as it were?
I mean, the right to protest has definitely been curtailed because it's a lot harder to organise a protest which you can guarantee will not fall foul of the law. For example, the locking on offence. If someone has a bicycle lock with them, they could potentially be arrested. But I think that in relation to this, the big change has been to sections 12 and 14 of the Public Order Act, which makes it a lot easier for the police to impose conditions if they consider there's going to be serious disruption, which can include more than minor disruption to everyday activities. And what that means is the police have such a low threshold whereby they can decide to impose conditions that they're under a lot more pressure to impose conditions on every
Mm.
protest, especially where people and politicians disagree with what's being protested about. And I think that puts the police, ultimately, it's not great for society, but it puts the police in a really tough situation, which is why probably Mark Rowley's being called into number 10 this afternoon.
Indeed. Well, thank you very much indeed for that very lucid explanation of the pros and cons and what's actually happening. That was Adam Wagner, Doughty Street Chambers barrister. Thank you again.